Cop noticed panicked dog and decided to follow him to a surprising scene. Cop noticed panicked dog and decided to follow him to a surprising scene. A police officer always needs to be on the lookout. You can never know when someone will need your help, or you may witness a crime that requires some action. For one cop, he thought he was working on a regular winter day in Wisconsin when he saw a surprising sight. A dog was wandering around the neighborhood, and it appeared to be in distress. As he was not animal control, he did not think much of this dog, but it did look like it was searching for something. After watching the dog go up and down the street, the cop knew it was time to get involved. Jeff Gonzalez had been a police officer in Wisconsin for several years. He knew the neighborhood, he often patrolled, well, and it was one of the quieter, more crime-free ones. February 15, 2015, would prove to be a day to remember in this police officer's career, though. Jeff would often find his mind wandering as he watched over the Autumn Ridge area. There had been a snowstorm recently, which saw Autumn Ridge covered in a blanket of the fluffy white stuff. All of the children in the neighborhood had gone out to play in it, and Officer Jeff was happy to see everyone enjoying the weather. What was rather confusing, though, was why a black Labrador dog was on the loose. It did not appear to be with its owner and was instead simply wandering around. A loose dog can be a hazard, even if it is a friendly one, as it can run out into the road. Jeff did not want anything to happen to this pet. Jeff began to contemplate what he should do about the loose dog. Was it lost, he wondered? Or had it simply run away from home and was going on a little adventure? Jeff knew that no matter what, he needed to get it off the street to protect it. He loved all animals equally, but he had a soft spot for a dog in need, such as this one. Carefully, Jeff approached the dog, and it barely noticed him. It seemed to be fixated on some point that Jeff could not see. He could not figure out why the dog appeared to be so agitated. Cruising by in his police car, Jeff got a better look at the dog. It appeared to be young and in good health, but it did not want to be bothered by him. In fact, it seemed like it was protecting something or trying to get someone's attention. It had Jeff's attention now, and he decided it was time to get out of his car and see what he could do for the poor dog. He did not want to alarm it any further, so he approached with caution. The dog took no notice of him at first. Moving slowly, Jeff opened his police cruiser door and got out of the car. The dog immediately perked up when he saw him moving closer. Instead of being scared of him, the dog immediately launched into action. He was thrilled to have finally gotten someone's attention and began to bark animatedly. Jeff noticed that his tail was wagging, which meant that this dog was friendly. He now actively walked towards the animal to see what was going on with it. He needed to know why this dog kept pacing by this particular area. Was there something he wasn't seeing? Now that this dog had Jeff's full attention, he began to run away from him. Jeff could not understand what this animal was thinking. 1 minute he wanted his attention, and now he didn't want to go anywhere near him. He decided to follow the dog and see if he could be of some assistance, or at the very least, try and catch this wily black Labrador. As soon as Jeff paused in his pursuit of the dog, it stopped running and waited for him to catch up. He stared up at him with those big chocolate brown eyes, and Jeff knew that something was wrong. Once more, the dog started moving away from him, and he continued to follow him at his pace. This dog was on a mission, and now Jeff was on the mission with him. After following the dog for a few streets, the dog ran over to a front porch and immediately began to nudge the person who appeared to be sitting there. As Jeff saw this, he knew what was wrong. The dog's owner had had some accident and was no longer conscious. He would need to lend his assistance to this woman, and do everything in his power to get her some help. Her faithful companion, the black Labrador, had done the hard part and gotten help. As soon as Jeff saw the woman, he feared for the worst. He hoped that he was not about to find out that she had passed away before help could be found. He quickly ran to her side, saw that she was incredibly pale, and reached out for her wrist to find her pulse. After a few minutes of searching, he finally found it. It was very faint, but she was alive. He immediately radioed dispatch and told them he needed an ambulance. Up until this point, Officer Jeff had been all on his own with the dog. He knew that his partner was out patrolling another section of the neighborhood and that his help would be needed. The woman needed to be brought into a warm area and fast. As soon as his partner drove up in his cruiser, the two carried her inside her house and set about getting some warmth back into her body. Once the woman was situated in her home, Officer Jeff and his partner decided to try and figure out who this mystery woman was. They were quickly able to determine that her name was Crystal Went, which meant they now had the unhappy task of locating her family. Crystal was going to need to go to the hospital, and the police officers did not want her to wake up alone. This meant her family would need to be informed. As the two officers and the unconscious Crystal waited for the ambulance to arrive, they were able to find the name and phone number of her daughter. Her daughter's name was Tian Went, and they really hoped she would answer the phone when they called her. As the phone rang, they heard Tian pick up. Officer Jeff explained the situation, and tried not to alarm her, but did convey that what was happening was serious. After that call, the ambulance showed up, and Crystal was brought to the hospital as quickly as possible. As soon as she was brought into the emergency room, Tian and Crystal's sister arrived. Everyone was concerned about what was going on. Why did Crystal faint? Her dog, whose name Officer Jeff was able to find out was John Boy, was beside himself with worry. Everyone wanted to know what was going on. For many years, Crystal had suffered from a heart condition that found her blood pressure fluctuating. Due to this, something had occurred to do with her condition, which caused her to lose consciousness. The officers thought that she had only been unconscious for a few minutes, but in fact, it had been over an hour. John Boy had been desperately trying to get people's attention for a long time. Sometimes pets do know what's best. While Officer Jeff was the one who ultimately found Crystal and got her in out of the cold, it was John Boy who did all the legwork. If he had not tried to get the neighborhood's attention, who knows what might have happened. Her dog would do anything for her, and he essentially saved her life. Being out in the cold without proper clothing can be the death of a lot of people, and John Boy was not going to let that happen. The officers and Crystal's family were beyond thankful to John Boy for what he had done for Crystal. He was surrounded by smiles, and everyone reached down to give him a pat and a scratch under the chin. Officer Jeff hopes that if he ever has a dog, that it will be a faithful companion just like this guy. John Boy definitely deserves a lifetime of treats for helping out the way he did. John Boy had always been a good dog, but his life was not always easy. When he was just a puppy, he found himself being fostered by 3 separate families. Each time, they returned him to the shelter for various reasons, which left John Boy heartbroken. He was the perfect family dog, and when Crystal saw him, she knew he was the dog for her. From the moment the two saw each other, they were inseparable. Crystal would need to recover after this ordeal, and John Boy was not allowed in the hospital as he was not a support animal. He definitely proved that he was a support companion during this process, though, and Crystal could not wait to get home to her dog. He was waiting for her and ready to run to the cops if something was to go wrong again. Officer Jeff knew to keep an eye out for this good boy. After everything that Officer Jeff did for Crystal and John Boy, her daughter Tian wanted to give him a big thank you. She asked Officer Jeff if she could give him a hug to say thank you for everything that he had done. As a cop, she does have to ask before she can touch him, but of course, Jeff said an emphatic yes. It was all thanks to his instincts that something wasn't right, that Crystal was eventually found. As a police officer, there are often situations that occur where everything might look normal, but it is not. Knowing when to trust your instincts is one of the things that all police officers need to have if they are going to be successful in their jobs. If you don't have that cop instinct, then you tend not to be a very good one. Officer Jeff has this in abundance, and he knows always to trust his instincts after this situation. John Boy is just one of many pets that has worked hard to keep their owners safe or go for help when there is a crisis. Cats and dogs have both been known to try and get help when there is a problem. In some cases, dogs and cats have let their owners know if there is a fire or a natural disaster coming. Their heightened senses allow them to smell and feel things before we do, which means you should always trust your pet. Pets, especially dogs, love you unconditionally, which means they should be treated with just as much love as they give to you. John Boy definitely deserves a huge hug and a delicious treat from Crystal as soon as she gets home. We all know that he will be waiting for her and staring out the window until she gets home. Crystal truly lucked out when she adopted John Boy on that fateful day. How could she know he would save her life? Now that Crystal has recovered, she and John Boy can spend their days together. Officer Jeff and his partner were glad that they were there in her hour of need. As they continue to police the area, they always keep an eye out for John Boy or any other pets that look like they are distressed. Autumn Ridge is one area that is going to be very well protected, both by humans and its animal inhabitants. It was just another day for Mark White. As per usual, he began his morning on a walk with his two beloved dogs. But the events that followed would be a day that he would never have anticipated. Just like John Boy, these two dogs lead their owner to a scene where his help was desperately needed, which resulted in them saving a life. Mark White lives in Michigan with his two lovable pups. Each day he takes his dogs for a walk around the neighborhood. But, this day, he was about to encounter something that would have a startling outcome. Rounding a corner, an unknown man approached Mark. The stranger was frantic. The night was drawing near, and he looked extremely distressed. Yet he could not get his words out and was choking back tears. The man was eventually able to get his words out, after some reassurance from Mark. He sat him down and told him to breathe deeply. After a few moments, the elderly man began to speak, but what he would say would be extremely worrisome. The man's wife, 64-year-old Terry Carl, had suddenly disappeared while on a walk with her husband. But Mr. Carl's wife was not like other women. Unfortunately, Terry suffers from dementia, a terrible degenerative brain disorder which often leaves its sufferers confused and severely disorientated. Often confused with Alzheimer's, dementia can be a serious and debilitating disease. The affliction can also cause severe short- and long-term memory loss, behavioral issues, and delusions. But those are not the only symptoms. Some dementia sufferers are quick to anger and, Terry's case can often be prone to wandering off. It was dusk, the sun was setting, and soon, the night would fall. The man and Mark knew that the search for Terry would be much harder at night. The September evening was cold, and soon, Mr. Carl began to panic. He had little idea as to where Terry had wandered off to, and the hours were beginning to tick by. Mark was known around the neighborhood as a friendly and helpful guy. As Mr. Carl began to panic, Mark assured him that would help him search for his wife. He would walk the park, take a different route, and keep himself alert to anyone that could aid him and Mr. Carl on their search for the lost and confused Terry. Mark searched the surrounding area for Carl, but he saw no one who resembled the woman that her husband had described. As he searched the local streets, he began to feel discouraged, thinking that he would help in the search for Terry. But Mark was accompanied by his two dogs, Belle and Crew. Soon, their noses began to twitch, and their tails began to wag feverishly. It seemed the right time to alert the police as well so that they had extra eyes on the search. The police put out an announcement so that others in the area would also be sure to keep a lookout for the missing elderly woman. Dogs have an intuition and a sense of danger, unlike humans. They pick up on sounds that we cannot hear, and they can sniff out things that we would never be able to find. Dogs are more than just pets, and especially these two pooches. Little did they know what they would find that day. Mark soon passed a patch of thick woods between two of the neighborhood's streets. It was getting very dark and eerie now. The hounds began pulling on their leashes. The dogs were alert and would not be deterred. Their strange and uncharacteristic change in behavior convinced Mark to follow the dogs. He had to investigate. Mark and his dogs crossed the busy street and headed into the woods. The forest was thick, but Mark persevered. Sure enough, in a small clearing between the trees, there was something shining on the forest floor. The dogs barked and ran up to find out more about what it was. The shiny object turned out to be a pair of glasses. But whose were they? And where was the person who owned them? As they carried on through the woods, Mark was getting very cold and wondered whether to turn in for the night. But he thought about the sweet old man, and he could not bear to let him down. So he pushed on with his pooches deeper and deeper into the woods. It all looked the same now, and it was just him and his flashlight to lead him and the dogs. The dogs started to sniff quickly and loudly, and drag Mark so much that his arm nearly came out of its socket. Running now, he and the dogs approached a clearing. And there in the clearing was just what they were looking for. A female figure was staring aimlessly and shivering. It was a sad sight to see. The woman was obviously confused but responded to the name of Terry. Mr. Carl's wife had been found. All with the help of Belle and Crew. Mark helped the woman up and headed back to the neighborhood streets. They went to the station to look for Mr. Carl. As they approached the station, an ambulance was outside. They rushed to see what had happened, and their mouths dropped as they saw that it was Mr. Carl on the bed. Sadly, they learned that Mr. Carl had had a severe anxiety attack, which must have been caused by his wife's disappearance. He stopped breathing, and so the ambulance was called in a hurry. Now they had to rush him to hospital. He was set up to a breathing monitor. Unforeseen circumstances. His wife, who was very disorientated, was taken home by Mark. But Mr. Carl's fate was still unknown. Mark waited by the phone nervously while watching Terry. He was waiting for a call from the hospital to find out what the verdict was with Mr. Carl. Just a few hours ago, he was fine, and now he was in a critical condition. It was very worrisome, especially with his fine in such a fragile state. All he could do was wait. Suddenly, he was startled as the phone rang, just as he was dozing into a nap. The doctor spoke to him on the phone and explained that they were able to restore his breathing back to normal and that he was going to be okay. Mark was overjoyed. Today had been quite the turn of events. But what happened to his dogs? Wixom Police Chief Ron Moore told reporters about White and his dog's amazing rescue. The officers were in the process of taking the police report when Terry Carl was ultimately found, he said. Moore went on to applaud both Mr. White and Helpful Hounds for their help with finding the missing woman. This is a great story, said Police Officer Moore, because we value our partnership with our community. Clever Dogs Bell and crew were rewarded with some doggy treats and a lot of attention from both Mr. Carl, the police, and their owner. Moore tweeted news of the dog's detective work, describing their rescue as a great job. But Bell and crew are not the only clever dogs who have helped recover missing persons who happen to suffer from dementia. On July 27, 2017, a trained police dog tracked down another woman who had been reported missing. The unnamed woman from Florida had been lost for hours but was found within a few minutes of the dogs being on the search for the woman. The Florida-based woman was actually found using her own scent. A sample of her odor had been bottled at a nearby police station so she could be tracked down in the event of her wandering off and going missing. The scent sample was over 2 years old. Thank goodness the kit used to store the sample had a 7-year shelf life. Dogs are more than lovable pets. Hounds are being trained as service animals to help dementia and Alzheimer's sufferers. These dogs help to assist people with routine activities that might forget to do during the course of their day. Service dogs not only offer the sufferer a loving companion but can direct them to pre-prepared notes that give them instructions and daily reminders. These dogs are only providing their human partners valuable companionship but also helping to remind their owners to take their medicine. Using sound recognition training, the dog is able to understand when to deliver their owner's medicine. They carry the package of medication to the sufferer along with an explanatory note that will remind the human what to take and what dosages to adhere to. These dogs' collars also make use of a special high-tech addition. They are equipped with a GPS device. These help to teach the pet to stay by the side of their owner at all times. The GPS device allows the dog and owner to be located, in case the two are ever separated. Most importantly, it also emits a high-pitched noise that sends the dog a signal. As soon as the sound is emitted, or the dog receives the vocal command, they have been trained to understand, the dog can safely lead its owner to safety. If their owner ever finds themselves in unfamiliar territory, this helps them to find their way safely back home. There are so many reasons why dogs are known as our best friends. This is one more impressive reason that can be added to the list.